God on the Move.
But one thing that is very common here in Madagascar is zebu sacrificing. We sacrifice zebu to honor the ancestors. And actually, our point of entry is a sacrifice, because they so much understand that when a sin has been done in a particular place, there has to be a bloodshed.
Madagascar is a large island nation located on the southeast coast of Africa in the Indian Ocean. It is renowned for its extraordinary biodiversity, with many plants and animal species found nowhere else on Earth. Madagascar's culture reflects a blend of African and Asian influences, shaped by centuries of migration and trade. Despite its natural richness, the country faces significant environmental and economic challenges that impact its development, shaped in part by its colonial history, periods of political instability, and ongoing struggles to build effective governance and sustainable economic systems. You are listening to the God on the Move podcast. This Lausanne movement production is part of a wider initiative dedicated to sharing testimonies of God's work across the world for every believer. And this is a story about resilience and hope for transformation in Madagascar. The voice you heard earlier is Mahafahatra Vonintsoa. She's a servant of Christ, and this is her story.
It's always a difficult question for me. Who am I? Because there is always a lot to be shared behind that question. And I think you can really relate to that. But first of all, I'm Malagasy and born in Madagascar. I have always been here in Madagascar. I have studied in Madagascar. I've never studied abroad. But I see myself as passionate about transformational development. And as a practitioner in maybe my area of work, the position that I hold then in my organization. And I have always been passionate about contributing and then bringing my own brick into the development of Madagascar. So my family is originally from Amurmani and Haimatiacha, that's the name of the regions here in Madagascar. They are located in the middle south of the island. And I have been raised in a very humble home. Our parents didn't have much, but they were educated enough, I would say, to also invest then in our education, my sisters and I. And as early as I can remember, in my sophomore year in university, I have been immersed into the economic development of Madagascar, because I have attended conferences of former alumni of our university, but they were very active in building projects, being a manager. And actually, the purpose of that conference was really eye-opening for all of the students, like my peers at that time. So, yeah, I think the passion started then. But then after almost 7 or 8 years of me being in the marketplace, like work marketplace, after about 7 or 8 years only, I had the opportunity to be recruited by the investment promotion agency here in Madagascar. And I was in my zone. When I entered that agency, I was just fond of what I've been doing. I have majored in business administration, marketing, and international management. I'm in local university in Madagascar. But then that investment promotion agency not only brought me back to the conference, being really to mix a lot with big organizations like the World Bank. We work together with the World Bank and all of these big institutions, which were actually also helping Madagascar to develop. But it was at that very moment when I was in that investment promotion agency in 2009, there was a coup in Madagascar, like a political coup. I was working at the investment promotion agency. We have managed to build a marketing tool to really attract investors to come in Madagascar and then to invest. We were just on the right track of doing things properly. Maybe finally at that time in Madagascar, But then the coup has happened, and it was during the coup that I have been born again. Like, if it was not the coup, I was not born again as a Christian. God has really transformed not only then my heart, but also my view of development. Because when I look into what I have been ambitioning, even for my country, for Madagascar, it was to be like all of the other country, developing country, which is in one sense very right. But the thing that God put in my heart was that He has His own way of developing Madagascar, and it starts with the restoration of the people. We are to be restored. We are to be healed also from the change that the colonization has brought, for example, in our country and so on. But then this change has also drastically changed even my viewpoint on how I assess project, if it is like investment project in Madagascar. But that was my personal, I would say, the way God has molded my heart and maybe how He has called me when He has changed my heart. But since then, the position or work that I have performed after that, I always brought into my work this perspective that is radically changing Madagascar. It's not a quick fix, but it has to touch people's life. It has to take into consideration also our characters, maybe our background history. And when I say that like this, sometimes it's very vague because the reality on the ground is very different. And I can tell an example. Later on, after working for this promotion agency, I have also worked to co-found a project like a renewable energy project in Madagascar. And in that project, for example, we are to set up a solar energy facility in a remote place here in Madagascar. But then, because I was contributing to that project and the way we were to facilitate the implementation of the project, we really like go to the people, really listen to them, waiting for they're ready to go. Like, now we understand the project and we will go for it. And it has never been something that is imposed to the local community, but we really wait that they are really ready to implement the project. Unfortunately, due to political interest of the final stage of approval of that project, it has never succeeded. We didn't reach the completion of the project, even though that was set to unlock the dependency of the energy facility here in Madagascar. We were very dependent on thermal energy, even though we have many potential to use solar energy, hydropower energy, all of those. It is used only at 2 or 5% of its potential in Madagascar. Yet, because of political interest, we couldn't make it. And because I was profoundly and emotionally invested in that project, I was very disappointed by my country, by the system here. Then I accepted to join a mission. I went on a mission to go in remote places in Madagascar. So it was a complete change of even environment for me, because I was so much used to, like, if it is a pyramid, then it is like the government level and big organization level and their view perspective of development. But then I went on a mission. It was a medical mission. We go to very remote places here in Madagascar and provide. I have no medical background, but I'm more in the supporting team. And then we go to remote places, and it was an occasion for me to also even discover my peer, Malagasy people, and how they really live in the countryside. Very eye-opening for me. And the more I was convinced of, we need to heal the community, we need to understand where it hurts before we can really bring development in Madagascar. And I joined that mission So even though I changed workplace, still that passion has been growing and growing inside of me. And then because that is your passion, but you have a family life also, what you go on a daily basis inside your home. I had parents. My parents were aging and they are sick. They have to follow some diet. Yet, as a missionary, working almost as a voluntary, my parents were leaning mainly on me, even though I have other siblings, because I am still single and all of the others have their own family. So the weight is more on me, which was not a problem at all for me because I really understood from God that, okay, if I am the only one who is not yet married, God is calling me to take care of my family. And I was really glad I was able to stand on the gap. And I had to find a paid job.
Before we continue with the story, I want to let you know that you can now join the God on the Move community on the Lausanne Action Hub. Be part of the conversation, see exclusive content and share your own testimony. You can find the link to join the community in the podcast description. Also, if you have a story to share or know someone who might have, please contact us at podcast@lausanne.org. That is podcast@lausanne.org.
And then in 2015, I joined a platform of vanilla importers. And it's similar to the work that I've been doing before in the investment promotion agency because we facilitate the work, or I would say we want to bring the development of a sector, the sustainability of a sector or particular sector. But this time then it was the vanilla sector. It was only vanilla sector. And even in that work on how we build programs and conceive a different project, I always have that in the back of my mind, like how do I bring more better change into the communities? So as far as I can in my position and in my assignments, I've always brought this touch of transformational development into the work. But then on the side, and now, by the way, now I rejoined the medical mission, but that is another long story again. The medical mission has been transformed. Before it was an association, but now it has become an NGO, fully dedicated to support then the medical or the health structure here in Madagascar, because it is still very weak also. But it has evolved into an NGO. So I recently joined back the medical mission. But anyway, long story short, I think within the course of my work experience and even other activities that I've been doing, I'm also involved in a university student ministry, the IFES movement here in Madagascar. It has been always there. How do I equip or how do I just convey this message that we really need to change and to transform first the people? And then it becomes easy for an individual or a community to find its calling and then just to bring development. Maybe it's not a straightforward way for them to find that, but even just the life testimony on how you are implementing what you are doing, there is always communication. And where there is communication, you can always convey that to other people. And this is my contribution. And I think the reason it was really out of an inspired thought, because when I shared my post on Lausanne Action Hall, I just finished a call with all of my friends and we were so much struggling. So this is the other side of the life, I think, in Madagascar. For Christians and for believers, even though we have this conviction to bring something, like to change things, we still have to face two struggles. First, our daily life, because life in Madagascar is very, very hard. There is a lot of unemployment, or even though you have a job, you have an income, the income is not enough for you to even invest in other ministry, because the understanding that is behind that sharing because my other friend, the mother of 4 children, Mianzu, for example, has a sociology major, and she has at heart to really build a school that can bring this healing to young children and then to youth and to teenagers. But if she has to approach, for example, a bank to build this project, the interest rate of a bank is too high. She will not be able to build that on her own. In Madagascar, because of that, the life that is difficult, you cannot find even that help within the church community because people doesn't always have any spare money to invest in that. So sometimes it's just very hard. And even though you have a lot of desire, it needs the effort of many, maybe the community that is surrounding you. So that's why we, as a community of this womenhood or sisterhood, we just want to help each other. And me, like what I bring into the inspirations of my friends like Mianzu, and the other one also is Entu, who has this girls' ministry in the region where we are from. I just bring my knowledge on how to set up a project, how to connect people and that, but it's just very singular efforts most of the time. And even though we pray a lot, we seem like our prayers are not heard, but we just don't give up. We just don't give up. We just like, okay, maybe not this time. And I can say that God somehow has his own way to support us, even just to sustain our conviction. And I have shared this also at Lausanne, but when I look into my personal experience, I feel like God is molding me more than, I don't know, like he's just fully into molding the person before, because I believe he's just able, but he's preparing. He has his own way and he's sovereign in doing that. But we build resilience in the meantime, more resilience than ever. Very long story short, but I wanted to give that perspective and still half of it.
I really hope that Mahafahatra's introduction got you excited. Embarrassingly, it made me realize that most of what comes to my mind when I hear Madagascar is from a certain children's film. But so I was intrigued to learn more about this marvelous and yet so complex and suffering country. To kick us off, I asked Mahafahatra about the religious landscape of Madagascar.
If I can share a little bit of the church history, we trace it back from missionaries, from London Missionary Society, LMS, who came to Madagascar, who has at heart, and I can give you a link to that. I hope there is a translation in other language, but it was originally in Malagasy. But we trace it back 140 or something, missionary who just had this big island in their heart and they just decided to reach out and share the gospel here in Madagascar. Their name was Thomas Bevan and David Jones, the names of our beloved missionary. If it were not them, then we wouldn't have heard about the gospel. And it was still a kingship back in those time in Madagascar, but it was a vibrant community. It has really spread. We have the first African translated Bible. I mean, from the history of church in Africa, the Malagasy Bible, the translation into Malagasy were among the first of being translated into an African language. And it was back in 1865, I think. And at the very beginning, it was the Protestant church, and later on, the Catholic arrived, because I think the English were the first missionary and then the French missionaries with the Catholic. We have also a history of the Malagasy originally have its own traditional beliefs. We worship ancestors. That is Malagasy beliefs. But Christianity has brought light into that. And even in our history, one of our queen has been converted into Christianity, and she has built a church inside the palace. here in Antananarivo, the capital of Madagascar. But since then, the church has grown, and we have also the story of martyrs, people who have died for their faith, which has been really impactful in spreading the faith in Madagascar. But now the number, it is about 40 to 50% Christian in Madagascar. And most of them are maybe the conventional churches, but a few numbers are really evangelical. Maybe out of this 50%, maybe 40% of the 50% are evangelical, and the rest is the conventional churches. And beside the 50%, we have about 10 to 15, it's Muslim Islam. It's growing in Madagascar. And we still have the traditional beliefs, most of Malagasy. And I think what we can say about the church in Madagascar, or even I say of myself, we are both churchgoers, but we still hold to traditional beliefs. That's how it is difficult sometimes when we think of, okay, 80% Christian in Madagascar. Most of Malagasy still hold into the traditional belief. We still worship ancestors, even though we go to church. And we were part of that before. But it was when I received Christ as my Lord and Savior, I was no more churchgoers. But I can really recognize that most of Christians are still holding the two beliefs. And because of that, the church in Madagascar still needs discipleship. I mean, that is still a very huge need to re-evangelize the church, to really have the true and only worship of our Lord Jesus Christ, not to mix him with any other belief, which is really idolatry for us. And we have a lot of similarity. I mean, if we just talk about the traditional beliefs, if you like the Indonesian, where we rewrap, we take a corpse and we still rewrap it because we believe that if we take care of the bones of our ancestor, it will bring us blessing. I think those who are really evangelical really try to spread this gospel in not necessarily just within the church, within the boundary of church, but even in other ministry, like community development ministries and so on.
In my ignorance, I thought and then went on to ask Mahafahatra whether the genealogies of the Old Testament and, for example, Matthew 1 in the New Testament would resonate with those who worship the ancestors and could potentially open up evangelistic conversations for discipleship.
I really like your question because it brings me back to when we were doing missions, like when we go to remote places, and in those places you have maybe a tree erected, which they think that they are the spirit of the ancestor is inhabiting this stone or tree. How we approach sharing the gospel to a community of people who are still holding to traditional beliefs was first to understand what are the beliefs in this place. But one thing that is very common here in Madagascar is zebu sacrificing. We sacrifice zebu to honor the ancestors. And actually, our point of entry is a sacrifice, because they so much understand that when a sin has been done in a particular place, there has to be a bloodshed. So the bloodshed is our point of entry when we really do evangelization in remote places. But if the people are in town or living in the capital, when there is a big traditional event in their home village, they still go and do the ancestor worshipping, because the people in the capital or in town have been exposed to the word of God many times. So sometimes our point of entry is the promises, to compare the promises between like what you have read in the Bible, yet what is your current life, because this is really a yearly tradition for Malagasy. It is this rewrapping of all parents who have died already. And there is a lot of money invested. Like sometimes a year earning are just invested in that. in a community who are already struggling with their daily life. We are still a very agricultural country, most of Malagasy. So the rice harvest is June and July. It is a winter season, and the people in the countryside still have money and still have rice. So all of that are just invested into this, let me use the word exhumation of the dead bones, are happening from July and August. And it is during the vacation of children. So when, for example, a family who is still doing that are having enough money during this vacation, but then when the school year will start for their children, they don't have money anymore to invest, for example, for the education of their children. And they have to lend money. And sometimes you just feel, even economically speaking, without the religion, talking about religion, it's already hard. It's already hard, but then it is very difficult to change.
Whilst listening to Mahafahatra, I looked at photographs of Madagascar and tried to imagine the different places and scenes she was describing. Unfortunately, as far too often in exotic places, here also is this immense juxtaposition of the beauty of nature and people and the hardship they endure.
We used to tell of our country, if it is a girl that is to be normally among siblings, for example, it is a very beautiful but very poor girl. And a lot of people desires to have her, but then people are just ripping things from her. And that is sometimes very heartbreaking for us. I think that is one of the aspects of how difficult also development is in Madagascar, because until now we have a lot of French interests. So from the colonization and to the French has added all of the other countries who are interested in the riches of Madagascar, but they just don't allow the people to thrive. And it's just very difficult. It's very, very hard. And this is why also our conviction comes from, if people are just transformed, if people have Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior, it will just make a difference. And we can trace it even back to this queen, because there was then her conviction when she became a Christian. So there is her personal faith in one hand, and then on the other hand, already the politics back in those times, because she has brought so many changes in the life of the palace that on the other side, some of the decisions that she has taken didn't really please the French interests, who had already an eye on Madagascar. They want to colonize Madagascar. And you can really see that from a political perspective as well as from a spiritual perspective for the life of Malagasy. And even the coup that happened in 2009, still very vivid in my memory. We got our independence in 1960 from the French colony. And it seems when we got the independence, there was a side contract between Madagascar and the colonizing country, which was France, that for 50 years, we will still protect the French interest. So if you count 1960 until we were supposed to be freed in 2010, and our president back in that period had a policy and economic development policy that was turning more towards other, not a bilateral relationship between Madagascar and France, but he had a very good relationship with Germany, with the United States, and just with any other country but France. And I think he was really planning to cut this, not to renew this side contract. And we have many confirmation leaked that the political coup back then was really backed up by France. And until now, we are still in a very difficult situation. The people who are in place in the government sometimes are corrupted by the French interest, of course. And then all of your effort, when I talk about this solar project, for example, my own experience, it is because of those interests. They just don't want you to thrive. And I think that is from, once again, political perspective as well as spiritual. Then we just cry out to God, can you help us break this tie? We do not hate French or France, but it is that they are really holding us. We are the only country that doesn't have a stock exchange. All of the financial sector, all of the banks here in Madagascar belongs to French interest. Interest is very high, and there are people, when you look into the economy, the society, there are people who are really at ease. Like if it is a pyramid, very few people are on the top, but most of the people are really, we have a flat pyramid. Yeah, very difficult.
Unfortunately and shockingly, Madagascar is not the only country that still suffers from past and present colonial policies. While officially independent, far too many countries are still feeling the tight grip of economic superpowers in other parts of the world, often private investors or companies that don't mind exploitation and horrendous crimes against humanity for financial and political gain. My only question is, why isn't there any outcry about it? Why no media attention?
There is a genuine explanation to that. This is how different also we as Malagasy are. We have a very strange resilience. I don't know how to describe it. We are very soft. We are malleable in French, like very easy to I don't know how to describe it, but even though we go through hard time, we can always smile. We can always find laughter. And sometimes this doesn't serve us good. Because if I compare to other African countries, maybe like we burst in anger, but we are like and this is because of our Eastern background, always respecting elders and that. So we find ourselves in that middle culture. If I talk about our ancestors, we had a history of unity. This is why, for example, we got our independence, because there was this insurrection where we just insurrected against French back in 1949. All Malagasy in just all Madagascar were one in heart, and then let's just fight against this French. But it happened only then, and it has never been renewed. And I think it reminds me of this movie of Patrick Swayze, that he was in India and he was helping a doctor who was helping the Indians, this caste in India who are the most vulnerable. And he was just helping that. It was not a missionary, but this doctor was really doing some mission there. And the sentence in that movie is a picture of a chicken, and the rich people in India is just putting enough weight on the top of the neck of the chicken to say that you don't pressure them too hard, but just enough so that they can't walk. And I think this is what happens to us. We have really reached a state where we don't have the strength to fight anymore. It has been so long that we just struggle to find food to put in our mouth, that to fight for freedom is not anymore the first priority. It's just on how you can feed your family. And the others finds that a very good opportunity, of course, to reap this girl of her potential.
And this was the perfect segue to how Mahafahatra and I got in contact in the first place. Earlier this year, Mahafahatra posted a call for collaboration for education in Madagascar on the Lausanne Action Hub, introducing her circle of friends, which they lovingly call the Sisterhood of Seven Women. Together, they are dreaming about an education center for children in Madagascar.
So I will try to share as much as I can from that project of Nyantsu. It is just a very simple project that she was available and she wants to reach out to young girls who just even lack the basic knowledge on how to behave in a society. Very simple. So it's to identify a need of maybe some girls and also checking their desire, like what do you want to learn? We will not be able to change your life overnight, but at least we want to bring some basic knowledge and education, and not only then, I would say, practical knowledge, but also to bring back again this sisterhood. Like you are in a community, you can lean on another. And she has been doing that. She has tried, and I think she has somehow found financial contribution from a project here in Madagascar. And she has already started to do something, and it's a punctual training, but then it is followed up with mentoring. She just continued to look after the girl, to check how is she doing, to facilitate, for example, if one girl said, I want to learn how to sew, to use a sewing machine. So she is identifying potential client for her so that she can not only be independent financially, but at the same time raise even slightly above the initial maybe social environments that she has been used to. And the idea behind is really to allow her to have her independence. And fly means be independent, but also to thrive, to develop personally, holistically. So the idea is very legitimate, and she really has that at heart. And for her, it's just a desire to continue to do so because the harvest is plenty. It's just the mean that is lacking. And her long-term vision is the other project, which is if she can open up a center that can welcome the girls, that it becomes like a live movement. The girls who can come and receive education there can also touch other girls' lives while she's there. So it is from that the vision is spread to others. That is Miantu, and a little bit same as that for Entu also. But the context of Entu, the context of the girls are more in remote villages. For Miantu, it is more the urban area. But for Entu, it is more in the rural community. And for Entu, her model is different because it is a circle of friends where, because she's not living there in the remote community where she comes from, but she's a visiting missionary, we can say it like that. But for every occasion where she can go there, she wants to assemble the children during a camp, for example, where again, it is a holistic approach. It is both spiritual, to receive also training, but at the same time to cultivate this circle of friends. And the circle of friends, because they just get stronger by being together. And it is a social construct that can really be developed there because she has already found the result of it in previous activities of the girls. It really starts with the need, be it like let the girls fly. The hive, the Anthill, there are these girls who have this lack of education in many areas. So it is a call for service, for example, if there are people who really wants to serve these girls. Some of the people who has reacted to my post in their own way. For example, I have an experience in how to dig a well. I just say an example out of the blue. But then if I want to serve and if I want to share that to this girl, how are you going to receive me, or how can my knowledge be serving then to the community of this girl? And this is, I think, what we are looking for, where we want to offer a platform where there is a need, and then for anyone who wants to serve or find a way to fill the gap of these needs can be received very openly to be part of the adventure with us. And it could be like a punctual mission. It could be a longer stay mission. Maybe I don't know much about volunteering from the Western world, but for example, if they have vacation, like 3 month long vacation, holidays, and if they want to serve, so we really welcome them to serve this girl because we are first an island. These girls have very close environment. So the more they are exposed, and even we are still very cautious about that because we don't want them to take just the impression of the outside world, but really from this servanthood perspective, so that not only they receive, but they can project themselves to be at service of their own community as well. This is what we are looking for. And we have mentioned, for example, something like a camp, which is a punctual. Then it can be a longer period mission for people who are willing to join. And there can be really the project funding type as well, where, okay, we cannot do neither of these, but at least we have funds and we want to help you to build, for example, the Anthill. And I think I shared that Nyantu, because she has at heart to build that project, she has continued her study in education. I think she has benefited some free online course, which has a biblical perspective as well, but I don't know the details. But these are the things like, okay, I got the knowledge. I know how to build, for example, a structure or the program itself, but then it is open for all the other future partners to contribute in that. And even we thought of, because Madagascar is very, if I just use the common people terms, very touristic, but we want to share the other side where people can really experience the daily life of Malagasy, maybe in remote places, and discover just our culture, our simple culture. So there is really two sides of it where we get to invite people to understand us and at the same time just to help us develop ourselves. And once again, and this is very strong in our conviction, we want to develop our own character because we have been very influenced by Western culture, that sometimes even the good thing or good side of our tradition, we have completely lost it. And we want to regain this love of our culture. So if the people who comes love even Malagasy culture, maybe we will find how precious our culture is for ourselves.
As always, there is so much more to say. More about the beauty of the country, its nature and people. More about the religious challenges. More about economic and political tensions. And so much more about amazing projects like Let Her Fly or the Anthill. But now, to wrap it up, I asked Mahafahatra to share something that's on her heart, and then prayer requests, so we can intercede more intentionally.
It's my belief, and I saw that in my life, that even though things are happening nationally for our case, and even globally, I would say, for the recent experience, God has at heart to touch the life of each individual person, each of his children. And that shows the sovereignty of God. That shows also how dependent we are on Him, because if we are not in Him, we will not be able to find His purpose for our own path of faith or of growing in faith, growing to know Him. And I have been amazed on how sovereign God is. And sometimes then, even though for our case in Madagascar, it is very hard, at the bottom of it all, I can still trust God that He has His way for Madagascar and to touch the life of many of His children here, so that we can also still make His name glorious for Madagascar. Be it in poverty, be it in we developing, God remains sovereign. And I have seen, since I was born again, it was inside that circumstances and where I experienced the hardest trial of my life. This has been recurring, and I have seen that truth. I think that's what I would like to share. So please pray for spiritual strength, and I will not say continuous resilience, because how we are enduring now is already hard enough, but that somehow we can find a way out for Madagascar to really embrace what God has in heart for Madagascar and for Malagasy.
You have listened to the God on the Move podcast, which is part of the Lausanne movement's wider God on the Move initiative, where we want to share inspiring God stories from the global church with the global church. Through listening to what God is doing all around the world, we hope to encourage and challenge the global church to faithful obedience to the Great Commission. So let's accelerate global mission together toward a vision for the gospel for every person, disciple-making churches for every people and place, Christ-like leaders in every church and sector, and kingdom impact in every sphere of society. If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, be sure to subscribe and follow us for more.